So I'm here today with composer Stephen Cabell. Stephen, thank you so much for having us.
My pleasure.
So let's start by talking about your relationship to kettle corn.
Yeah. I have a pretty strong relationship to it.
Yeah. So do you make much popcorn in your day-to-day life?
Never.
Really?
No. Only when I go to the movies or one of your concerts.
I want to talk about the piece that we're premiering on this concert. It's a piece that is a very long gestation process, and that's a thing that's unique about you as a writer. So can you just tell us a little bit about the background of this piece?
Sure. So it's a 3-movement solo piano work that I conceived of in 2009, and I've slowly been writing it, very slowly. But I from the very beginning, I knew I wanted to do 3 movements and have this sort of dramatic arc, and that each movement will somehow relate to each other. But I started by writing the first movement I wrote was going to be the last movement. I don't know, I like knowing where I'm going and then figure out how I'm going to get there in the process. So I wrote the final movement first in 2009, and then I didn't come back to it again until 2012. And I wrote this slow lyrical middle movement, which I always knew I wanted to be in the center of the piece. I've been waiting for the right moment to write the first movement, and then when you guys came along and asked me to write it, I knew this was the time to finish the piece, finally. It's 3 individual movements that, for the most part, I believe can be performed individually, but together they create some greater whole that I'm really excited to present and to hear for myself.
As are we.
Yeah.
So one of the things I think is really interesting about this piece and about your music in general is your approach to harmony. How do you think about that?
Well, I honestly just follow my ears wherever it takes me. I think that's what you have to trust yourself, trust your own, the way you hear the music, and that's just, I love lots of music, and a lot of it makes its way into my own music. And harmonically, I guess I don't think about it in a very analytical way. Just whatever comes out, comes out.
One of the other things that I was thinking about when I was thinking about this piece is a lot of your music is orchestral music, and a lot of I think the way you think about music is very orchestral and lush and about orchestration. How does that inform your writing when you write a solo piano piece?
Yeah. Oh, really, I'm wishing it was an orchestra. But I love the piano. But I like to utilize, as you said, I thinking about it in an orchestral way. So there's a large range of the piano. I like to use it almost all the time. And I have to apologize to the pianist for that. But I like things to be rich and sound full and thick when I like them, and sort of exposed when I need it. And the piano is a good substitute for the orchestra.
So one of the things that we're doing with Kettle Corn New Music is trying to present concerts outside of a totally traditional concert, breaking down some of the barriers and having an experience that's a bit more laid back. So one of the questions we love to ask our guests on this program is, what are some experiences you've had outside of traditional concerts that were meaningful to you?
Well, for a long time, well, not a long time, but several years, I used to go to a big music festival in Tennessee called Bonnaroo. And that is not a traditional concert setting. Of course, it's not traditional classical art music. But that was, for me, the first time I'd ever experienced music outside of really a classical concert hall. And it was very memorable. And I loved it. It was about 80,000 people in 7 stages simultaneously. And just that a different way of experiencing music is, I think, really important to keep it fresh. And that's why I love that you guys do this concert series in the way you do, with camaraderie is a big part of it, and socializing and sharing. Like, you have to share music that you feel strongly about.
Stephen, you're from Kentucky.
Yes.
Tell me about that.
Well, I mean, it's a big part of who I am, and growing up there, you might think that there weren't a lot of opportunities to hear classical music or to be exposed to different kinds of music, but there absolutely were, and I was very lucky to have that. My parents, wanted me to hear classical orchestral music, and we had a little orchestra that I went to for as long as I can remember. I also was taken to a lot of bluegrass concerts, and as a kid, I wasn't really into it.
Oh, really?
Not at all. But as I grew into that as well, and I love bluegrass music, and I love the energy that's behind it, rhythmic energy, and its virtuosity. It is in this sort of strict form, but that allows it to really to experiment.
One of the other things I was thinking about is the fact that you are a car driver. I feel like
I am a car driver. I have a license and a car.
Well, I mean, I'm from New York City, and I don't have a license.
Right.
But in addition to that, I think that there's there's some cultural thing about driving in cars and listening to the radio that, if you're from a place that everyone has a car.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, it's interesting you mention it, because actually the inspiration for the piece that I wrote for Kettle I had while I was driving back to New York from Kentucky.
Oh, yeah.
It's called murmuration, which is a term for a flock of starlings. But when I was driving home, this flock of some kind of bird, not starlings, but some flock of bird flew over my car, and I was just mesmerized by it. And I was in the middle of beginning this piece, and I was like, something about it, about the way the flock moved, reminded me of the music I was writing, and it really guided that piece more in that direction. So I went home and I looked up videos of flocking birds. The flocks of starlings were the ones that captivated me the most. Just really beautiful, fluid movements. So, though wasn't originally inspired by starlings in particular, I just love that word, murmuration. But it also would have another connotation of, murmuring, which I think also I like that applies to this piece.
Well, we can't wait to hear it. Thank you so much for having us today, Stephen.
Oh, it's totally my pleasure.
It's been a pleasure to talking.
Thank you, Alex.